If you ask most Americans where the next massive earthquake will strike, they'll probably point straight at California, because let's be honest, California and earthquakes go together like Hollywood and drama. But what if the real seismic wildcard isn't on the coast at all? What if it's hiding right in the middle of the country, far away from crashing waves and fault line headlines? Deep within the heart of the United States lies one of the least understood yet surprisingly active seismic regions in North America, the New Madrid Seismic Zone. And unlike California's well-known faults, this one doesn't constantly remind people of its presence, which makes it even more unsettling. It's quiet until it isn't. This region has a history that reads more like a disaster movie script than a geography lesson, and scientists believe it could produce a series of powerful earthquakes again in the future. So what exactly is the New Madrid Seismic Zone? Why is it capable of generating devastating quakes? And what could actually happen when the ground starts moving again? Let's dig into one of America's most unexpected geological threats. The New Madrid Seismic Zone may not get the same Hollywood-level attention as California, the Pacific Northwest, or Alaska. But don't let the lack of fame fool you. This is one of the most potentially dangerous seismic regions in the United States. Stretching across Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, this hidden geological hotspot has the power to disrupt millions of lives, and yet many people have barely heard of it, which is slightly concerning when you think about it. To understand why this region shakes at all, we need to go way back, and not just a few centuries back, but roughly 750 million years ago during the Precambrian era. At that time, the ancient supercontinent Rodinia began to break apart. As massive forces pulled the crust apart, a rift valley formed, but here's the twist. The continent never fully split. Instead, the rift failed, leaving behind a long-lasting weak zone deep within the Earth's crust. Think of it like a geological scar that never fully healed, quietly waiting to cause trouble millions of years later. Today, that ancient, failed rift lies buried beneath layers of sediment deposited by the Mississippi River. And yes, the Mississippi isn't just a famous river, it's the lifeline of this entire region, winding directly through the heart of the New Madrid Seismic Zone. Over time, the river created a vast alluvial plain filled with rich, fertile soils, which helped turn the area into a major agricultural powerhouse. Fields of cotton, soybeans, and other crops stretch across the landscape, making it look peaceful and stable, which is ironic, considering what's hiding beneath the surface. Despite the region's generally flat appearance, the terrain isn't completely uniform. The land gently rises into the Ozark Plateau to the west and the Appalachian Mountains to the east, creating a striking contrast between low-lying floodplains and rugged uplands. The Ozarks, in particular, are known for their karst landscapes filled with caves, springs, and sinkholes, a reminder that the geology here is anything but boring. Although the seismic zone itself is mostly invisible, its effects have shaped the surface in subtle but important ways. Past earthquakes have altered river paths, including sections of the Mississippi River, created new lakes, and reshaped the land through processes like liquefaction and landslides. In other words, the landscape carries hidden clues of its turbulent geological past, even if most people driving through might never notice. What makes the New Madrid Seismic Zone especially fascinating and a little unsettling is the type of earthquakes it produces. These are intraplate earthquakes, meaning they occur within the interior of a tectonic plate rather than along its edges, where earthquakes are more commonly expected. This makes them harder to predict and somewhat mysterious to scientists, since they happen far from the boundaries of the North American plate, where most seismic activity occurs. Adding to the challenge is the fact that this isn't a single, clearly visible fault line. Instead, it's a network of faults crisscrossing beneath the surface, hidden under layers of sediment. Because these faults are buried and less obvious, the region often flies under the radar, which explains why many people don't associate the central United States with major earthquake risk, despite the area's history of significant seismic events. Today, the New Madrid Seismic Zone remains a major concern for geologists and emergency planners alike. While it hasn't caused large-scale destruction recently, history shows just how powerful it can be when it awakens. But before we dive into the dramatic earthquakes that shaped this region and why they still matter today, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider hitting that subscribe button. More fascinating geography stories are just one click away. When most people imagine earthquake danger zones in the United States, their minds jump straight to California or maybe Alaska, places where the ground shaking almost feels like part of the local identity. The middle of the country? Missouri, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky? Not exactly where you'd expect seismic chaos. And yet, right along the borders of these states lies the New Madrid Seismic Zone, a region where millions of people today could be at risk from a major earthquake. And we know this risk isn't just theoretical, because it has already happened, and on a massive scale, within recorded human history. The defining moment came during the winter of 1811 and 1812, when a series of powerful earthquakes struck the region. Estimates suggest magnitudes ranging between 7 and 7.5 enormous events, especially for the interior of a continent. Even more astonishing was how far the shaking traveled. These earthquakes were felt across roughly 1 million square miles, making them some of the most widely experienced quakes in North American history. Imagine people, hundreds, even thousands of miles away, suddenly wondering why their furniture was moving. Not exactly a normal Tuesday. Eyewitness reports from the time sound almost unbelievable. Observers described waves rolling across the ground like ocean swells, rivers appearing to flow backward, and massive fissures opening in the earth. Chimneys collapsed, trees snapped, and entire communities were left shaken both physically and emotionally. The town of New Madrid, Missouri, located near the epicenter, suffered extensive damage, and the landscape itself changed permanently. New lakes formed, sections of the Mississippi River shifted course, and the region's geography was literally rewritten by the earthquakes. And as if one disaster wasn't enough, the shaking didn't stop quickly. Because of the unusual nature of this seismic zone, aftershocks continued for years, reportedly lasting until 1817, nearly 5 years after the initial quakes. That's not an aftershock. That's a geological encore nobody asked for. Although later earthquakes haven't reached the same intensity as the early 1800s events, the region hasn't been completely quiet either. Significant earthquakes occurred on January 4th, 1843 and October 31st, 1895, with estimated magnitudes of 6 and 6.6. The 1895 earthquake, centered near Charleston, Missouri, caused widespread damage, destroying buildings throughout the town, and even creating sand volcanoes, a dramatic phenomenon where liquefied ground erupts upward. Cracks appeared on infrastructure like the Cairo Rail Bridge, and damage was reported far beyond the epicenter, including in street. Lewis, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee, Gadsden, Alabama, and Evansville, Indiana. Even earthquakes outside the immediate New Madrid seismic zone hint at broader regional activity. On November 9th, 1968, a magnitude 5.4 earthquake near Dale, Illinois, damaged buildings in Henderson, Kentucky, and was felt across 23 states. Some reports claim people as far away as Boston, Massachusetts felt buildings sway, which is probably not what anyone expects during a normal day on the East Coast. Over the years, scientists and historians have studied geological records to better understand how often large earthquakes occur in this region. Evidence suggests that major seismic events may have taken place roughly every 500 years over the last few thousand years. But here's where things get interesting and slightly frustrating for scientists. Experts remain divided on whether another large earthquake is likely in the near future. Some believe the zone still holds significant potential, while others argue the risk may be lower than previously thought. Either way, the New Madrid Seismic Zone remains one of America's most intriguing geological mysteries, a place where the Earth's past reminds us that even the quietest regions can hold powerful surprises beneath the surface. Compared to places like California, large earthquakes in the New Madrid Seismic Zone don't happen very often, which sounds comforting until you realize that rarity doesn't mean safety. In fact, the potential impact of a major earthquake here might be even more concerning today than it was in the past. Why? Because since the early 1800s, the region's population has grown, cities have expanded, and infrastructure has multiplied, meaning far more people and assets are now sitting directly in harm's way. And here's the big difference between the central United States and the West Coast: preparedness. In California, buildings are often designed with earthquakes in mind. Engineers expect shaking, so construction standards reflect that reality. But across much of the central US, seismic risk hasn't historically been a top priority. Many older structures, including homes, schools, and even hospitals, were built without modern earthquake-resistant designs. That means a strong quake could cause severe damage or even collapse, while newer buildings might still struggle if they weren't engineered to handle significant seismic forces. Basically, the architecture here was designed for tornadoes and thunderstorms, not for the ground suddenly deciding to dance. Beyond buildings, critical infrastructure would face major challenges. Bridges, highways, pipelines, power lines, and communication networks could all be disrupted at once. Interstate 55, a major transportation artery connecting New Orleans to Chicago, could become unusable for an extended period, severely impacting logistics and emergency response. And then there's the Mississippi River itself, arguably the economic backbone of the region. During the earthquakes of the early 1800s, parts of the river reportedly reverse flow temporarily, which sounds like something straight out of a disaster movie, except it actually happened. A future earthquake could again disrupt navigation. And even if the river doesn't reverse, debris and structural damage could block shipping routes entirely. The ripple effects wouldn't stop there. Supply chains could experience serious disruptions, potentially leading to shortages of food, water, fuel, and medical supplies. According to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Mississippi River carried more than 500 million tons of imports, exports, and domestic freight in 2019. If that traffic suddenly halted, the economic consequences would extend far beyond the immediate earthquake zone. Locally, agriculture, one of the region's economic pillars, would also face significant risks. Soil liquefaction, a process where saturated ground temporarily behaves like liquid during intense shaking, could damage farmland and infrastructure. Storage facilities, roads, and transportation networks might be compromised, disrupting agricultural markets not just regionally but globally. Past studies paint a sobering picture. A 1,991 FEMA report estimated that a magnitude 7.6 earthquake could result in about 2% of the population killed, up to 10% seriously injured, roughly 10% of buildings collapsing, and 30% suffering severe structural damage within counties closest to the epicenter. A later 2004 report modeling a magnitude 7.7 earthquake projected damages around $296 billion, and nearly 730,000 people displaced from their homes, numbers that would turn a geological event into a nationwide crisis overnight. Today, the new Madrid Seismic Zone is home to just over 2.1 million people. The Memphis, Tennessee metropolitan region leads with about 1.3 million residents, followed by population centers like Jonesboro, Arkansas with 135,000 people, and Cape Girardeau with 100,000, along with dozens of smaller towns and cities. But the impact wouldn't stop at the zone's borders. Nearby cities such as St. Louis, Missouri, Nashville, Tennessee, and Evansville, Indiana could also experience significant effects, meaning millions more could feel the consequences. What makes this situation especially interesting is that many residents don't actively expect a major earthquake, even though they live within a well-known seismic area. And yet, nearby Oklahoma has shown how quickly perceptions can change. Despite lacking major fault lines or a long historical record of strong seismic activity, Oklahoma has become surprisingly familiar with earthquakes in recent years. It's a reminder that geology doesn't always follow our expectations, and sometimes the quietest regions can deliver the biggest surprises when the ground finally decides to move. In recent years, Oklahoma has experienced something few people ever expected, an explosion in earthquake activity that transformed one of the quietest seismic regions in the country into an unexpected hotspot. Instead of occasional tremors, the state began experiencing earthquake swarms, clusters of hundreds of small to moderate quakes occurring within relatively short periods of time. And unlike many earthquake-prone regions around the world, this surge wasn't driven purely by natural tectonic forces. Humans played a major role. Around 2009, seismic activity in Oklahoma suddenly grabbed national attention. The state went from averaging roughly 2 magnitude 3 or greater earthquakes per year to more than 524. That's not a small increase. That's like going from a quiet neighborhood to hosting a nonstop drum solo underground. Most of these earthquakes have been concentrated in central and northern Oklahoma, although their effects have spread far beyond state borders. Some of the quakes have been surprisingly strong. The largest in modern Oklahoma history reached magnitude 5.8 near Pawnee in 2016, causing significant concern and damage. More recently, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck near Oklahoma City, the state's largest population center. Buildings, roads, and infrastructure have experienced damage, and shaking has been reported from as far north as Fargo, North Dakota, to as far south as San Antonio, Texas, proving that even moderate earthquakes in the central United States can travel long distances due to the region's geology. But here's where Oklahoma's story differs from the New Madrid Seismic Zone. While New Madrid's earthquakes are tied to ancient geological structures, Oklahoma's recent seismic surge is largely linked to human activity, specifically the deep injection of wastewater produced during oil and natural gas extraction. This process involves pumping large volumes of wastewater deep underground into geological formations for disposal. While effective at managing industrial waste, it also increases pressure within the subsurface, potentially reactivating dormant faults and triggering earthquakes. In simple terms, Oklahoma didn't suddenly develop new fault lines, we just started pressing the wrong buttons underground. This explains why earthquakes in Oklahoma became common after decades of relative quiet. The region's seismic history changed dramatically, turning what was once considered a low-risk area into one that regularly experiences measurable shaking. So what does this mean for the New Madrid Seismic Zone? While experts widely agree that a large earthquake will eventually occur there, the likelihood of a sudden swarm of events similar to Oklahoma's recent activity appears relatively low, at least for now. Still, when a major quake does strike New Madrid, the impact could be severe, especially given the region's infrastructure and population. And that's what makes the New Madrid Seismic Zone so fascinating and a little unsettling. It's a reminder that some of the biggest geological threats aren't always where we expect them to be. If you enjoyed learning about one of America's most mysterious earthquake regions, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're curious to explore more geography stories and hidden risks shaping our world, check out the next video right here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.